At Boise State Public Radio, we understand that not everyone is able to give financially. Did you know there are other ways you can give? We are looking for new volunteers to add to our ranks and have a variety of opportunities.
Who wants to volunteer?
If you're interested in a hands-on volunteer experience, visit our website under the Support tab to find out more at boisestatepublicradio.org.
Thank you to all the staff and volunteers who are part of Boise State Public Radio.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. A parasite that can cause weeks of severe diarrhea is spreading across the country, with more than 1,000 confirmed cases nationwide, including one right here in Idaho. Health officials believe many more people have been infected, but they still don't know what food is causing this outbreak. So what should folks know? How concerned should we be? It's Wednesday, which means it's time for our Dr. Roundtable with Dr. David Pate. He is the former CEO of St. Luke's Health System and the co-author of the book, Preparing for the Next Global Outbreak. Hi, Dr. Pate.
Hi, Gemma.
And folks, remember, if you have a public health question, send us an email, idahomatters@boisestate.edu. Okay, so Dr. Pate, let's just start with the basics. What exactly is this virus, and how is it different, from a typical stomach bug that a lot of us get?
Yeah, this actually isn't a virus. It's a parasite, and it is different because, first of all, there's in the usual kinds of things that people would refer to as food poisoning or infections from food. Most of those have their onset within a day or two of eating the food. This one's very different in that it's not uncommon for symptoms to not occur until a couple of weeks even later. It can occur as soon as 2 days, but it can be as late as 2 weeks. Average is about a week. And the other thing is that this tends to cause much more persistent symptoms, as you were mentioning, lasting a lot longer than the typical, more commonly known food poisonings or food infections. And this one is a little tougher to diagnose, so you have to kind of be looking for it. But the good news is it does respond to treatment. The big risk in this infection is people getting severely dehydrated because the diarrhea can be quite voluminous for a long period of time, while at the same time suppressing the person's hunger and sometimes even their thirst. So people can get into trouble with dehydration.
Mm. So, Dr. Pate, as I mentioned, Idaho now has a confirmed case, at least one case, in someone who did travel out of state. And health officials here are saying they expect more. So how concerned should folks be here in Idaho about this?
Yeah, so let me clarify a little bit more about where I didn't think the communication was clear enough for people that aren't familiar with this illness. The risk to us, unlike a lot of other infections that you and I have talked about over the last 6 years, is not because of that person returning to Idaho. That person is not the risk. This infection is not spread person to person. What I think the department is trying to point out is that here it is summer. A lot of folks are off from school, off from work, common vacation time, time to go visit relatives. And a lot of people from Idaho may go to those states that are having this big outbreak. We're not having it at the moment here in Idaho. That could certainly change. But the state that seems to be hardest hit is Michigan, although there are a lot of cases in Ohio, New York, lots of other places in the Midwest, Northeast. And so I think what their point is that we're at risk of Idahoans traveling to those places and getting infected just as this person did.
So, with all of that said, Dr. Pate, let's talk about symptoms, okay? So, what should someone be considering? Because sometimes it's like, oh, maybe I just ate something, but what should we be asking ourselves?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There are lots of things that can upset people's stomachs. Not infrequently do some people have brief periods of diarrhea, whether they due to something that they ate, whatever. But I think a really good rule of thumb is if you are having diarrhea persist more than a couple of days, that's really the time to get in touch with your doctor. The symptoms with this can be wide ranging. Some people don't have problematic symptoms with this. We are
Mhm.
particularly going to see more problems in the young and the aged, as with many conditions. But you may or may not have fever with this illness. So, whereas a lot of times people use fever as an indication of infection, that's not going to be so helpful in this instance. Really, it's going to be abdominal discomfort, perhaps bloating, perhaps nausea and vomiting, but really it's the watery diarrhea. And oftentimes, profuse. That is the tip off. The other thing that this illness can do that's a little bit different from most causes of diarrhea is that you can kind of have a big bout of it and then it kind of seems like maybe you're getting over it and then it gets
Mhm.
bad again. So that would be another clue. But the really is the duration. If you're having symptoms more than a couple days, contact your doctor.
So, Dr. Pate, I know right now investigators have not identified the source, but we do know that past outbreaks have been linked to foods like lettuce, cilantro, basil, berries, other fresh produce. So, I'm a bit, I love lettuce, I love salads. Should we be avoiding those kinds of things right now, or is that a bit of an overreaction?
It is probably an overreaction, especially here in Idaho. And you might ask, well, why is this occurring in parts of the country and others? Now, let me just first say it's happening in a lot of parts of the country. We now have 34 states that are having outbreaks. But food distribution is complex, especially when we deal with produce. There's a lot of complexities to it. My guess why we haven't seen activity in Idaho is probably whatever the source of this is, it's a distributor that is probably more on the East Coast or in the Midwest that those states are more heavily relying on, and we probably are not using as much of that product. That would be my guess. But no, I don't think we need to be overly concerned. But
Mm.
as the Department of Health was warning, we very well may see an uptick of cases in Idaho. And I think that until we identify what it is, some really common rules of thumb ought to be applied. First, before you handle food in food preparation, thoroughly wash your hands with soap and water. Second, if what you're preparing with produce is something that you have, sometimes it's not appropriate to cook, but if it's something that you think, well, this could be really good if it was cooked, we do know that cooking to 158 degrees or more will kill this parasite. So that's
Right.
one thing. But if you're going to, I think I'm like you, Jim. I like fresh produce. I like to have salads. I like to have fruit.
Hmm.
So wash the outsides of it if it's amenable to it. So we think that bagged salad mixes are at higher risk than, for example, getting a whole head of lettuce. If you get the whole head of lettuce, run it into the water, but just peel off the outer couple layers of the lettuce. Just toss that, and don't use it. And then just thoroughly wash the rest of the lettuce before you. What I do is I pull it apart as I wash it and put in a colander to drain it and let it go that way. Where you're going to get, and now we're talking about all kinds of produce in the past. Again, no one knows what's causing this outbreak, but it could be things like cilantro, parsley, basil, snow peas. Where it gets a little trickier is we have had outbreaks in the past due to things like some fruits and some that are a lot harder to clean, like a raspberry has been tied to past outbreaks, and all their little crevices and all, it can be difficult. But if you have a fruit that you can use a food cleaning brush on, run that under the water and use that. But washing thoroughly will help. And then, of course, the plus of if you're able to cook. But I don't think we need to avoid these foods. Just use good basic food preparation hygiene.
So, Dr. Pate, I also want to talk about the fact that this outbreak has sparked some discussion about whether recent cuts to public health programs have slowed investigators' ability to identify the source of this. Can you help us understand what's actually true? I mean, how do these investigations work? How have cuts to the CDC potentially impacted or not impacted investigators' ability to locate the source of this yet?
Right. It is a complicated question. I don't think that the cutbacks are responsible for the outbreak. In other words, this outbreak would have likely occurred regardless. I think what the difference is that had we not made the cuts, we very well might have learned about this earlier because one of the things that got cut is some of our proactive surveillance. Now, people are quick to point out that, but these are still reportable infections, so the information goes there. It's just a matter of timing. When we're proactive, and the program that got significantly cut was a proactive monitoring for these kind of infections. Now, it's not designed to detect outbreaks, but I think it's very possible we might have realized something was going on earlier. I think the other thing is that with the cuts to that program, we'll have less information that allows us to look back and identify trends in these kind of infections, what might be going on, what steps we might need to take. So I do think there is a relationship, but I don't think it's a direct cause and effect. Now, the staff cuts certainly may play even more role. These are very difficult. Most foodborne outbreaks, they can be challenging to investigate, but they're usually not terribly difficult, and we usually get to the bottom of it. And like I said, with most people getting sick with the common food outbreaks a day or two after eating, if I asked you what you had to eat yesterday or what restaurants you went to, you could probably give me some pretty helpful information. But like this outbreak, where you might have been infected a week or 2 weeks ago, that's a lot harder. My guess is you don't remember where you ate a week ago today or what product you bought and might have cooked with or used. So this is a more difficult outbreak to kind of get to the bottom of. I think we will, but that does require a lot of staff. The other thing is with the usual kinds of food outbreaks, we can use genetic testing to tie cases. That's much more difficult and much more complex with this organism, so we don't have that tool. So mostly we're just going to have doctors on alert, be on the alert for this outbreak, and people on the alert that if you're getting an illness and it's causing more than a couple of days of illness, get in, let's get tested, find out if you have it, because we can treat it.
So a growing number of parents are declining the routine vitamin K shots that's given to newborns, and pediatricians across the country say they're seeing a troubling increase in babies arriving with life-threatening bleeding that is almost entirely preventable. So, Dr. Pate, for folks who may not know, what exactly is the vitamin K shot and why is it given to newborns within hours of birth?
Yeah. So the first thing to know about this is something we've been doing since 1961. That is 65 years we've been doing this now. Now, vitamin K is exactly that. It's a vitamin. Some parents are under the misimpression that it's a vaccine. It is not. It is a vitamin that is very important in all of us for our blood clotting. And the problem for newborns is that vitamin K does not pass through the placenta from the mom to the baby very efficiently. So the baby doesn't most of the time get enough vitamin K. Once the baby's born, and if a mother is breastfeeding, it gets a little bit more, but it's still not enough vitamin K. And the problem is that our system for absorbing and processing vitamin K in our bodies is dependent upon the development of our GI tracts that require solid food. And so babies typically don't get to the point of being able to absorb enough vitamin K on their own until around 6 months. So what we do is when a baby is born, we try to do it within the first 6 hours, just go ahead and give them this vitamin K shot because it bypasses their gut and it's absorbed in their bodies. And now they can make the clotting factors normally that is needed to make sure that if you have an injury, you don't excessively bleed.
So, as you said, Dr. Pate, this is not a vaccine, it is a vitamin. And a lot of parents, outside of not fully understanding that it is not a vaccine, is that they're worried about preservatives or they believe the shot is not necessary. What does the scientific evidence actually show about its safety and effectiveness? And my understanding, too, according to a New York Times article that just recently came out, is that if you are worried about a preservative, you can ask for a vitamin K shot without any preservatives in it.
And that is correct. So the vitamin K shot, regardless of with or without the preservative, is very safe. And how do we know this? For 65 years, we have administered this to virtually every child born during that time. And so if there were problems, I can't imagine exactly what the number of births would be in the last 65 years. But we've got to be talking about hundreds of millions. And it would show up if there was a problem. The preservative is in a very small amount. It's been tested. Does not cause harm. But again, like you said, if you're still worried about it, ask for the preservative-free vitamin K. Otherwise, this is an extremely safe medication for you to get. It's a medication that your body normally absorbs from food and utilizes, kind of like for those people that have to get a B12 shot because they can't absorb that. So it's very safe. And what is terrible is that, parents are getting scared by things that they see on YouTube, TikTok, or, some podcast or whatever, where people are just making up nonsense. And they have their reasons. There are motivations for people to put out this nonsense. Mm-hmm. But here's what I want parents to learn from this. One is, I understand you being confused. But the second thing is you cannot just stop there. Our natural way of processing this is if we're not certain, then we think it's better to side on the error of not giving it. Well, that is a fallacy here because we know it's safe. We know that if you don't give it, at least 1 in 60 babies will have a bad problem from this. And so if there was something to be worried about, then for us to have missed it over the 65 years, it would have to be something that occurs, one in, a half billion or a billion times or something. And that's not reasonable. Also, just you're going to have to use critical thinking and some logic here. It is rational to have a concern because of the information out there, but ask yourself, is it logical? First of all, who are you getting this information from? Are these reputable physicians that are licensed, that have had training, that are going to be held accountable if something happens? Your pediatrician, your family physician, they're accountable for their advice and decisions. People on YouTube and TikTok are not. Another thing is some parents will say, well, I don't want to inflict the pain on my newborn of the needle stick. I get you. Our natural tendency is let's protect our children. Let's not subject them to pain. But again, ask yourself, is this logical? If we took it out of that realm, if your baby was having a complication and I came to tell you your baby has a problem from birth that we need to operate, or the baby is going to suffer death or consequences, would you say, no, I don't want the surgery because I don't want to inflict pain on my child? No. So go a further step and use logic. There are people that say, well, I don't want to give the vitamin K because I want, a natural birth. Well, this isn't part of the birth process. The baby is already born. And if you say, well, but, then I want to do natural things. Well, look further. So does that mean you're not going to supplement with formula? That's not natural. It may have natural things in it, but that's not natural. How far are you going to carry this and for how long? Things... we just need to think critically about it, and please talk to your physician. We understand you're being misled. We understand why you would be confused, but there is good evidence here, good information. And just ask your doctor, what would you do if it was your own child or grandchild? And they'll give you their advice, and they'll tell you what they did for their own kids.
So with our last couple of minutes, Dr. Payne, I want to also turn now to the state of Wyoming declaring a measles outbreak in Teton County. Now, for folks who aren't familiar, Teton County literally is on the border of Idaho. This is where Jackson, Wyoming is. They've confirmed 3 linked cases in Teton County, and it's raising concerns about possible exposures at Grand Teton National Park during peak summer travel season. So, Dr. Pate, what should people here in Idaho be paying attention to? Because, yes, this is happening across the border, but I mean, this is right across the border from eastern Idaho.
Yes, and this is a very different situation than what we led off the show with, talking about cyclospora, which is not transmitted human to human. In this case, measles is the most contagious virus that we know of that infects humans. So this is a threat. And let me assure you, with the measles cases increasing across the country, here at this point of the year, we already have had as many cases as we had in all of last year. And we had big outbreaks last year. So it is coming. We are going to have we're not going to escape this. We've been lucky so far, but our luck will run out. So here's what you need to think about. Again, I know, parents, you're getting a lot of confusing information. There are people that are promoting all kinds of nonsense that don't know what they're doing, or they do know what they're doing, and they're doing it for various personal gain. Please talk to your pediatrician or your family physician. Please know that we have been giving this vaccine, the measles vaccine, for since the 70s. So we know that this is safe. We know that you're going to hear things that, well, it's better for your child to get natural infection. It is not in this case. It is potentially much more harmful. If you can prevent this infection, you will get just as good protection, but you will escape all the bad things that can happen for years to come after the child gets infected. So if you're going to be traveling, you have a young child, talk to your pediatrician or family doctor, discuss the timing for the vaccine, discuss any of the concerns you have about the vaccine, but please be careful where you're getting your information from. People are getting hurt by this.
So, Dr. Pate, measles was declared eliminated in the United States more than 25 years ago. We are now seeing more outbreaks. Our status could be potentially eliminated. Again, talk to us. We've got just under 2 minutes left about the likelihood of that happening and what that actually means.
So I think it's almost certain that we will lose that status. And what that means is a huge public health accomplishment that we had, a success in the United States, to the point that if you'll reflect back to just 5-6 years ago, 10 years ago, you didn't have to worry about measles. You weren't hearing about measles in the press and media every day. This is what is happening. And why is it happening? Because we are abandoning measures that are proven to work. If we can get a sufficient percent of the population, and because measles is so contagious, it has to be a high percentage of people. But if we can get a high percentage of people vaccinated, we can shut down the transmission of measles in our country to the point that you don't have to worry about your kid in school. You don't have to worry about getting on a plane. You don't have to worry about travel and something bad happening. So that's what is so sad about this, is because we don't have to live like this.
Mm. Well, Dr. Pate, as always, we so appreciate you. If you have a question for Dr. Pate, send us an email, idahomatters@boisestate.edu, and we will answer it next week. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Make sure you check out our podcast feed because you can find more episodes of topics that might be interesting to you. And for more local news and headlines, make sure you subscribe to the Connector podcast. And text this podcast to a friend. It's how podcasts grow.
Love Boise State Public Radio podcasts? They are free to enjoy, but not free to produce. If you can give, your support helps keep shows like Idaho Matters and Scandalize available to everyone. Donate now at boisestatepublicradio.org.